these ceremonies express the imagination. These ceremonies are tools of the imagination for shaping the imagination in a better way. I'm thinking about the culture a lot. I mean, I know that that's kind of my main thing, but I'm finding politics, like I said, during the main show, I find politics in August kind of absurd. People get all excited about this thing with gerrymandering and all this. Gerrymandering is going to go on forever. There's no way around it. And when Republicans do it, it's an atrocity. When Democrats do it, it's another day. It's like Tuesday. So it's just silly. You can't get too wrapped up in those things emotionally is to be constantly depressed or angry or whatever. And I'm just not into it. But I really am interested in the way ideas are shifting. And this is a huge shift. I mean, essentially my generation is dying off and has lost its grip. And I think that's a good thing. Hopefully when they die off, they won't take me with them. But I think it is way past time. We've done enough damage, and we've done a couple of good things. I mean, Donald Trump, I think, was good, and Ronald Reagan, maybe. But yeah, no, I think it's well past time. And I'm thinking about one of the things I think about a lot is this thing of social constructs. The idea that something is a social construct and therefore it's not real and therefore it's bad. And of course, the one that is the most obvious one that's just so crazy is gender is a social construct. And you think about that and you think, well, yeah, in the sense that it's God didn't make women wearing skirts and men wearing pants. That is a social construct. But it is to celebrate and emphasize the differences between men and women that are part of the great joy of life. There are only two kinds of people in the world. There's men and women. Those are the only two kinds. Everybody else, everything else is like variations on a theme, but like men and women are different kinds of people. And we love that, right? That is, the French say, vive la différence. That means basically, this is great, hooray for the difference between us. And the idea that it's a social construct and therefore it's bad is just amazingly stupid. I mean, and so I was thinking about Shakespeare's play Henry V. I knew you could guess that, right, from what I was saying. No, you couldn't. But Henry V is such a brilliant work because it takes Henry V is like the great iconic hero of Britain in that time, in the Renaissance. And there's King Arthur. Obviously, he's more of a legendary figure, but he's sort of the great hero. So you might think of King Arthur as the way we think of George Washington, where everything is named after George Washington. You're in Georgetown, walking down Washington Street toward the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. And that's like the kind of mythic weight that Washington has, like King Arthur. But Henry V was the great hero, maybe the Lincoln of their time. I mean, it's obviously not a great correlation. So here is Shakespeare, and he's writing Henry V. So he's celebrating their great hero, and he's the ultimate showman. So he doesn't want people to, to hate him or hate the hero, but he's also one of the deepest minds that ever exists. So he deconstructs, as the left would say, the fact of the king. Now, this movie was made in 1944 by Laurence Olivier, who was the great British actor of his time. And it was made, obviously, to buck up the British during World War II. And so it's a tremendously patriotic movie and a tremendously serious movie, and celebrates Henry V and takes all of its battles very seriously. And people remember it as being one of the great films of all time. I find it almost unwatchable now. I find it stiff and silly. And Henry V looks like Danny Kaye, a famous comedian. A famous comedian he was reputedly sleeping with, actually. And so I can't focus on it. Whereas I think Kenneth Branagh's 1989 Henry V is the single greatest Shakespeare film of all time. And the thing that was coming back to me is there's this wonderful scene. It is kind of the heart of the show. They're at Agincourt. And Agincourt, there's something like 10,000 French soldiers ready to wipe them out. They're invading France to get back some land that they want. It's this very obscure dispute. And the French have like 10,000 soldiers, and the British have, I think, a tenth of that. They have, I think it was like 10-1. It was amazing odds, incredible, incredible odds. But what the British had was they had the bowmen. They had the ability to shoot from a long distance with great accuracy and do damage. And they won. They won this incredible battle. It's like the Alamo in America if Davy Crockett and the Americans had won the battle. It was a miraculous, miraculous battle. And so a lot of the play takes place on the night before they're facing what they believe are going to be impossible odds. They're all going to die. And so Henry V dresses up. He says, I'm going to give them a little touch of Henry in the night. And he dresses up as one of them, and he goes and he talks to the soldiers, and he finds out what they're thinking. And the soldiers are thinking, well, the king has dragged us out here, but we're the ones who are going to die. We're the ones who are going to die. And Henry V dressed up says, well, you want to, it's not the king's fault that you're going to die. You don't have to come. And he says later on, anybody who wants to leave can leave because we're facing these terrible, terrible odds. But then Henry himself has this moment of self-doubt where he says, everything is put on the king. He says they put our lives, our souls, our debts, our careful wives, our children, and our sins. We lay them on the king. He says, but what has the king got that private men don't have? Obviously, I'm translating this from the Old English. And he says, except for ceremony, they have ceremony. That is what kings get. That's it. The ordinary people can sleep, but the kings can't. I'm going to play a long clip. This is about 2 minutes long of Kenneth Branagh talking about ceremony, what makes a king a king. Let's play that clip.
Know thou proud dream that playest so subtly with a king's repose. I am a king that find thee, and I know. 'Tis not the balm, the scepter and the ball, the sword, the mace, the crown imperial, the intertissued robe of gold and pearl, the facet title running for the king, the throne he sits on, nor the tide of pomp that beats upon the high shore of this world. No, not all these thrice gorgeous ceremony, not all these laid in bed majestical, can sleep so soundly as the wretched slave.
So he's saying that he has all this ceremony. I'm cutting that off, it's so long. But he says, there's all this stuff, the sword, the mace, the crown imperial, the, robe of gold, and all the people running the tide of pomp. But you can't get any sleep because you're the one who's bearing the burden of the world. Uneasy rests the head that wears the crown. And so he's saying that a king is nothing. He's just a person, right? Everything, the flowers smell the same to him as they do to everybody else. And all he has is this ceremony that makes him the king. So he's deconstructing kingship. Shakespeare's deconstructing kingship while he is telling the story of England's greatest hero. Why is it that nobody said, he's right, let's get rid of kings? I mean, about 100 years later, they actually kind of really did hobble the king a lot, but they're basically, they still have a king today, and they still have all that pomp and ceremony today because the ceremony raises the king up if he lives into it. In the same way that our manners raise us up if we live into them. I open the door for my wife, not to impose some kind of she can't open the door for herself. I do it as a gesture of respect for her and a gesture that my strength, such as it was when I was young, is at her service. I stand for her out of respect for her when she gets up from a table, and you should do that for your wives as well. Those are things we do not because we have to, not because it's built into the fabric of the world, but it expresses a way of being in the world that matters. And in fact, Henry V then goes out and becomes the king by winning the impossible battle of Agincourt. And that is what the play is actually about. What the play is about is saying, yes, it's all ceremony. I'm just a man, but as a man, I will become a king. And that's what we're all doing here. It's what all of us are doing here. We're all becoming fathers, husbands, great workers, great, friends, all of the things that we're becoming through ceremony that we live into. And these ceremonies express the imagination. These ceremonies are tools of the imagination for shaping the imagination in a better way. We can't get rid of our lust, our greed, all these different things, but we can shape them in such ways that they serve people. That's what capitalism does. It shapes your greed, hopefully, so that you can still have your greed, but you color within the lines. Marriage shapes your lust. You can still have your lust and your desire, but you use it to the service of love. All of these things can't be gotten rid of, which is what the left is trying to do. Don't lust, don't like, white women, but not black women. Don't feel this, don't feel that. No, but we do have structures. When they take those structures apart, they set loose the crooked heart of man and make things intolerable. These structures should be held on to, not gotten rid of. Some of them may go out of date, some of them may be too unfair, some of them may not work. But just because something is a social construct doesn't mean you get rid of it. And that is what Henry V is about and why it's such a genius work. That guy is so great. If you'd like to see more of him, like and subscribe. And if you'd like to see even more of him, subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.